Ut. It is the year of our Lord 1000, no, actually it is 2016. It is the 950th anniversary of the Battle of Hastings, give or take a few days. And welcome aboard the Longship Company vessel Seehafen, a 12-oared, square-sailed, dragon-headed, steerboard on the starboard side longship belonging to the Longship Company Limited, a non-profit educational organization incorporated in the state of Maryland. I am Bruce Blackston, otherwise known as Atlee, and I am a member of the Longship Company. I have been asked by Fred Blonder, one of our captains, to do my infamous Viking Striptease. So I thought, and Fred thought, that there would be no better venue than aboard the Longship, on which we've spent so much love and labor and hours at the rowing bench. So, 1066 and all that, what would you wear to the battle? Autumn, it's a little bit cool. Finally on the Chesapeake Bay, and this year the weather has turned halfway tolerable. So tonight this would come in much more handy, but I'm wearing a simple half-circle wool cloak and a very simple hood, which I will now remove, as becomes a striptease, as the weather has grown warm this afternoon. The cloak is held by a penannular brooch that I forged at Oakley Forge, and used one of my wife's bread hooks to forge it. I was once told that they were only made of bronze, and the person who told me that was accompanying me to the Smithsonian to their Viking exhibit in 2000, and by golly, there was an iron one right there. But undoubtedly not forged from a bread hook. In the reenactment community, we use what we get, much like our ancestors. Now, you'll see I am dressed in armor, and I bear various arms, but we'll start with the armor first, and the missing piece is a shield, which we have conveniently stowed over the side. Now, like everything else in history and reenactment, people have been complaining about various passages in the saga that shield so-and-so was made fun of because he always had his shields out. But honestly, it's the most convenient place to stow them when the weather is decent. So I follow that. When the weather is terrible, you pull them inboard and everything gets cluttered. Now, the laws of Big Charlie, Charlemagne, you know him as, declares that a man's arms are a spear and a shield. So this is modeled after an Anglo-Saxon example, which tended to be dished. And we have found that dish shields do not hang very well on the gunwales of a longship. Flat shields like the Vikings used hang much better. Nonetheless, since I portray an Anglo-Norse from County Durham, I adapt various bits and pieces from both societies. So shield helps put something between you and your foeman. A spear, and spears are almost always depicted on rune stones and such as being kept in the stern, and we find this to be absolutely the best place to keep them because they're A, out of the way of everybody, and B, handy for the officers. Now, if you've got some people with spears laying around on the thwarts, you're going to have some injured crew. So you've got your spear, you've got your shield, and that might be all you would have. You would be dressed in your tunic and your bravery. Bravery is good, your tunic is decent, but it doesn't make you any luckier than the next guy over in his tunic and bravery. So, being of the wealthy sort myself, or at least the character I portray, I actually have armor. Now, armor does two very important things. Keeps the insides in and the outsides out. The helm has a nasal down the front. This is very useful. People complain that you could go cross-eyed looking at the nasal. It's just like wearing your modern eyeglasses. You don't look at the frame, you look through the lenses and you look beyond it. Not only is the nasal not a bother, but it protects the entire upper part of the face from lateral blows. Protects the nose if you've been punched in the nose, protects the eyes to a certain extent. So a nasal on a helm is a good thing. It's a standard feature in this period. Underneath the helm, first I'd better unbuckle this strap. Underneath the helm I'm wearing a coif. The coif is about 3.5 pounds. The helm's about 3 pounds, so that's 6 pounds sitting on my head. It's approximately 1,200 links, and it's made out of 17 gauge wire, and it uses 1/4 inch links. So it's very comfortable. One of the features of my particular personal mail is it's got a rune on the front, which it doesn't matter with the coif, but also quite uniquely it has a yellow streak running down the back, so that I can tell two things. Number one, I can tell which is the back of my mail when I'm putting it on, and number two, I can tell if an enemy has snuck up behind me because they see the yellow streak and break up into laughter. Nice theory, practice may vary. So we have the coif. Remove that. Underneath the coif we have a cloth snood, which keeps my hair from being caught up in the coif and tangled, and that can be a very unpleasant experience. Now, wearing all this, of course, one's hair is a mess. I will note that an English cleric wrote that the Vikings combed their hair and beards, changed their underwear, and bathed regularly, the better to seduce Christian women. And guys, it works. So, now that I'm properly groomed, main male Bernie, okay? This is a style that would have been worn by Vikings and Englishmen. It's relatively short. We found out very quickly that if you wear the long Norman Bernie that you see depicted in the Bayeux Tapestry on a Viking ship, essentially you end up sitting on the mail. With these, you can sort of heist it up and pop your butt on the rowing bench, and it's out of your way if you're going into battle. With a long one, you're sitting there and it's grinding into you. Very uncomfortable. If I were to go overboard, which I have no intention of, I like being on board ships, not overboard ships, you can swim, we have discovered, for about 3 minutes if you're a strong swimmer. Our usual drill that we have practiced under stable conditions is you turn yourself upside down, undo your belt, and shimmy and shake, and if everything goes well, the mail slides off of you. Meanwhile, your friends on board are desperately trying to rescue you with boat hooks and other objects. So, the other thing we have discovered if you're wearing armor on board a ship is it raises your center of gravity so that your balance changes. So our general policy is you don't put your armor on when you're aboard a vessel until you really need to put your armor on. It's not something where you wear your armor all the time in case somebody half a mile away has a really strong bowman. It's not going to happen. Nobody who's within sight of you is any threat until they're within 50 yards or less. And that gives you some good time to put things together. Now, on the weaponry, once again, you have your spear. The spear is a much underrated weapon. You can use it to thrust, you can use it to slash, you can use it to hack. People don't realize this. This one is fitted with the ferrule at the other end, so even if it's broken, I have a spare end It's also useful with the ferrule to stick it into the ground, and you can sort of walk away from it a little bit. Ferrules were never particularly delightful to ship captains, and in later ages you could tell a land pike from a sea pike because sea pikes never had ferrules on them. While we're in the stern, we have a unique weapon, boat hook, and there's a passage in the saga where the king's chief seaman grabs a boat hook at a critical point and lays about him. And the king says, well, that's not a very noble weapon. And his seaman says, no, sire, but one uses what one is good with. So we use these hypothetically if a jet skier gets too close to the ship. Beware jet skiers. Once again, stowed in the stern or in the bow where it's handy, accessible, but mostly out of the way. Personal arms. The sword. Everybody likes swords. Everybody thinks swords are really, really cool. Now, the advantage of a sword, it's a close-in personal weapon. It's got a point, it's got an edge, very versatile. This particular one is modeled after Type 10 under Peterson's nomenclature. Has a bronze pommel to provide counterweight, has a wrought iron guard or quillions to provide some protection for the hand, has a simple double-edged blade with a fuller down the middle to provide lightness and strength. Fullers act a little bit like the corrugation on a tin roof or on cardboard, so it both lightens and stiffens. Everybody likes swords, but I am not totally devoted to the sword. My favorite weapons tend to be axes. Now, you've got a variety of axes. This is my walking axe. This is a good woodsman's axe that I can use when I'm strolling around. I have a bad foot, so sometimes it bothers me, and sometimes I use this as a walking stick. And it has plenty of reach, so that if I need it in a hurry, or if I want to reach out and touch someone, it's there. This would be a fairly common weapon for a fairly common person. We have throwing axes. Okay, these are sometimes called half axes. I'll get to that later. So, but anytime, if any children are listening, anytime your parents tell you you've done a half-axe job of something, this is what they're referring to. One of my favorite axes is the bearded axe. Very, very useful. It's good for hooking on the gunnels, it's good for hooking on the docks. We have actually used it in a pinch to replace the tiller on the steerboard on our Viking ship when the tiller broke, which happens from time to time. Hopefully this one, beautifully carved tiller with knots forming the eyes for the raven, will last a good long time. It's good for hooking shields, so you can pull the shield away from your foeman. The axe is a very versatile weapon. Okay, you can use the axe to cut down trees. You can use the trees and the axe to build Viking ships. You can use the ship that you helped build with the axe to sail across to England. You can drop in on an Englishman early in the morning, set his barn on fire, and see what develops from here. You can use an axe to remove limbs from trees. For firewood, perhaps. You can use an axe to remove limbs from Englishmen. It happens from time to time. You can use an axe to joint an ox, to cook over the fire from the limbs that you cut down to celebrate your victory over an Englishman. The axe is a versatile weapon. really, swords are for show, the axe is for dough. I really like the axe. It is a good item. Now, previously, this fell out of its scabbard, a constant problem. This is called a sax. So, it had various forms. Different blades were used at different times by different people or contemporary with each other. Saxes were a tool and a weapon. So the nice thing about a sax is it's a little bit heavier. Now in the back I have another smaller sax, which traditionally seamen carry in the back of the belt so that you can reach it with either hand. So if you need to get a hold of something while you're holding on to rigging or ruffians with one hand, you can pull it out with the other. So that might be a modern practice, but most seamanship practices go back a long way, and since a lot of the nomenclature is from the Viking Age, this works too. So small handy knives could be used as weapons, but mostly they were used for utility. They were used for eating. They were used to cut line in a hurry. I have been on voyages where I had to cut a jammed halyard because the ship was sailing into a dock. So I cut the halyard, we dropped the sail, and we bounced off the dock a lot nicer than if I hadn't had a knife handy to do what needed to be done. So most good seamen carry knives. Now that strips me of most of my weapons. So I can remove this. Oh, wrong one. I can remove that. There we go. Might as well remove this too. Now, my protection at this point is the mail. And I have two more pieces of protection here. I am a good Christian. I've been baptized 3 times. Once when I was captured, they took us all down to the river, and I was very worried because I'd heard about how Charlemagne had baptized the Danes. He staked them out at low tide and sent the priest out to bless them as the tide came in. They all drowned, but they did get to go to heaven. My second baptism was when the cousin of mine was trading with the English, and the English had a provisional baptism showing I was thinking real hard about becoming a Christian, and therefore I was good enough to do business with. The third baptism occurred when the king became a Christian. And when the king adopts a religion, it's probably a real good idea to follow the king's lead if you know where you want to go in this world, and possibly the next. Now, an Irish monk gave me this cross. I had to hit him a couple of times, but he gave it to me. But I still wear a Thor's hammer because my grandfather says that my new God may have walked on the water, but the White Christ never tried it on the North Sea in heavy weather. So when the bishop comes by, I tuck this in, and when we're in a bad storm at sea, I pull it back out. The Bernie is my main piece of armor. It's 12,800 links, weighs 22¼ pounds, or about 10 kilos, and took about 130 man-hours to make using modern tools and materials. It consumed about a quarter mile of 14 gauge wire. So back in those days, those days would have been around 1974 or such, I made it for myself because nobody was making it for me. But as you can see, here it is many years later, and it's working just fine, thank you very much. So if you've got a Bernie and it lasts you 40 years, you're doing pretty good. So removing the Bernie is always interesting. You actually will see this in medieval manuscripts where somebody is shown after the battle taking off his armor, and it's mostly a matter of standing on your head and bouncing. Also, armor is a lot easier to wear than it is to carry. Ugh. All right, I am down to my tunics. We'll go toe to head. I'm wearing a pair of goatskin shoes that my friends Terry and Janet made for me. Null-binded socks that I believe either, can't remember who made these for me. Sorry, but they're appreciated. Frequently I will trade ironwork for clothing, but most people are just my friends and they do nice stuff and they do good work, so always nice. The under tunic, which is linen, I'm wearing bracelets because the sleeves are, as usually depicted, over length, and you see those wrinkles. Well, the nice thing is with the jewelry, it helps to hold them in place so that you don't drop your sleeve in your soup. But on the other hand, when it's really cold in the evening, you've got that extra length available. Now, since we advertise this as a Viking Striptease, I'm going to go all the way. Normally I would be wearing a brooch up at the top. This is a nice Anglo-Saxon style brooch attached to a very nice Anglo-Saxon hat. But that's for feasting. This hat is the one I usually wear on the ship or in the blacksmith shop. It's a little ratty, but it's comfortable. Both of them made out of wool. The one with some very nice work on it. Okay, so we've got the under tunic and the over tunic. And the over tunic's been repaired by one of our crew. So you keep it going, and when it gets real raggedy, you pass it on to the poorer sorts. A few scars. This one up here, that's from a half axe coming across, as anybody can see how neatly it matches the blade. And the other scar is from, of course, the famous Danish broadaxe. As you can see, it split me right down the middle, and I died. So, miraculously, I'm still talking to you, and I can't shut up about this sort of thing. So, that's the way things work sometimes when you're in the reenactment community. Thank you for your time, and I hope you've enjoyed this exposition. And if you want to join the Longship Company, we'll take you out for free. Bringing you back involves negotiation and always involves rowing. So, welcome and thank you from the Longship Company, from the good ship Seehafen, and from all of our members and crew, and from the Markland Medieval Mercenary Militia, our confederated overarching organization. Good day, sir. And my lady.